This podcast uses AI-generated content. All information is for general purposes only and does not constitute financial, investment, legal, or regulatory advice. Listeners should verify information independently and consult qualified professionals for personalized guidance. Welcome to the Luxembourg Fundcast. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive, looking into two documents that, well, they often get confused, but are actually fundamentally different in corporate law. I'm talking about the Shareholders Agreement and the Share Purchase Agreement.
That's right. They both deal with company shares, obviously, but their purpose, their structure, even their legal implications, they're really worlds apart.
Exactly. So our mission today is to unpack these essential distinctions. We'll do a clear, sort of clause-by-clause look and explore the practical side too, negotiation, costs, timelines, all within Luxembourg's legal scene, including the latest updates. And we've boiled it down to three key takeaways for you listening. First one, function dictates form. Okay? The crucial difference here is that a share purchase agreement, the SPA, it's a transactional document. Think of it as being for a single one-time sale of shares.
Just that one moment in time.
Precisely. Whereas a shareholders agreement, the SHA, that's relational, it governs the ongoing relationship between shareholders. It's like a deed of sale versus a rule book for how everyone gets along. Second takeaway, contractual freedom isn't absolute. Now, Luxembourg law gives parties a lot of freedom, set their own terms.
Significant freedom, yeah.
But, and this is key, that freedom is hemmed in by mandatory rules. We're talking about the Law of 10, August 1915 on commercial companies and the Luxembourg Civil Code. If a clause goes against public policy or those laws, it's just void.
Doesn't count.
Right. And navigating that tension, that's really a core challenge when you're drafting these things. And third, confidentiality. This is a big differentiator. A unique selling point, really, of the shareholders agreement is that it's confidential.
Completely private.
Unlike the company's articles of association, which have to be filed publicly, an SHA is a private contract, no publication needed. So shareholders can agree on sensitive stuff discreetly.
Very useful for certain arrangements.
Absolutely. So we'll explore all these points in more detail. Let's begin. Okay, so if the SPA is about the deal day, like you said, and the SHA is about life after the deal, how do these really different purposes actually play out in the documents themselves? Let's unpack that.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Let's start with the Share Purchase Agreement, the SPA. So at its core, it's just a legally binding contract. Seller, buyer, transferring shares for a price. Simple concept.
Right.
Its purpose is singular. Execute one transaction. It's purely transactional. Think M&A, management buyouts, one partner buying out another. That's when you use it.
Makes sense.
And critically, it's temporary. Its main job is done at closing. After that, sure, some clauses might survive warranties, indemnities maybe, but only for a set time.
Yeah.
Drafting an SPA is, well, it's a defensive game. You're focused on allocating risk for things that happen before the sale using representations and warranties.
Okay.
Legally, it's based on general contract law and the Civil Code. Sale happens when you agree on the thing and the price.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward.
Right.
Yeah.
Simple agreement. So that covers the one-off event.
Yeah.
But how does that contrast with the shareholders agreement, which sounds like it's built for the long haul?
Exactly. The SHA is fundamentally different. It's a private contract, usually between some or maybe all of the shareholders, and it governs their ongoing relationship with each other, and sometimes with the company, too.
So it's about the future.
Precisely. It's relational, designed for the long term. It creates a custom-made governance framework. It adds to, and sometimes even changes, the default rules you'd find in the company's articles, or in the company law. That's the Law of 10, August 1915.
Okay.
You see SHAs pop up when, say, multiple founders start a company, or during joint ventures, new investment rounds, maybe managing a family business. Unlike the SPA, the SHA is meant to last, to evolve even. Its core clauses, decision-making, how to handle disputes, rules for transferring shares, they're all about managing future events, things you might not even foresee right now. So drafting an SHA is more constructive. It's about collaboration, about resolving conflict down the line.
Building the framework.
Right. Now, it's still governed by civil code contract rules, but it's heavily shaped by mandatory company law stuff, shareholder meetings, capital protection rules, public policy, and crucially, an SHA cannot contradict the company's articles. If there's a clash, the articles win. They're public, they prevail.
That's a really important point.
It is. And a common mistake is trying to stuff long-term governance rules into an SPA, or maybe forgetting to define how shares get sold within an SHA. That just leads to confusion later. Big mistake.
That distinction really sets the stage. So these different purposes, how do they actually show up in the clauses? Let's deconstruct them.
Okay, the SPA. It's structured very carefully to manage the risks and the nuts and bolts of transferring ownership. So obviously you identify who's involved, which shares, the price. But often you get more sophisticated pricing mechanisms too.
Like what?
Well, you might have a locked box mechanism that fixes the price at signing based on an older balance sheet. It gives the buyer certainty, but they also take on the economic risk from that earlier date.
Okay, fixed price, clear risk shift.
Or you could have earn-out clauses. Here, part of the price is conditional. It depends on the company's future performance.
Ah, so the seller gets more if the company does well post-sale.
Exactly. Imagine a buyer pays extra only if the company hits certain revenue targets after they take over. It's a good way to bridge valuation gaps, especially, with founders who are staying on. Their success is tied to the company's future.
Interesting. What else is key in an SPA?
Conditions and closing. Most big deals aren't unconditional from day one. The SPA lists conditions precedent. Think of them as hurdles.
Hurdles to clear before it's binding.
Precisely. Things like getting regulatory approval, merger control, maybe foreign investment screening, or securing financing. The SPA sets a long stop date, a deadline to meet these conditions. If you don't meet them, usually the deal terminates.
Okay.
And then the closing mechanics is like a detailed script for the final handover. Time, place, what documents get exchanged, share certificates, board resignations, and exactly how the money flows. Very precise.
Right. The choreography of the deal.
Then comes the really heavily negotiated part, risk allocation and protection. This is where representations and warranties or R&Ws come in. These are statements of fact the seller makes about the company.
Like the accounts are accurate.
Exactly that. Or there's no ongoing litigation, we have good title to the shares. The point is to force the seller to disclose information, and it gives the buyer a basis to claim if those statements turn out to be false.
And indemnities, you mentioned those two.
Right. Indemnities offer more direct protection. They're a promise from the seller to pay the buyer back, euro for euro, for a specific known risk, maybe a known tax issue or that lawsuit we mentioned.
How's that different from a warranty claim?
With an indemnity, usually the specific event just needs to happen for the payout. A warranty claim typically requires proving breach, loss, causation. It can be more complex.
Got it. So sellers must hate giving broad warranties and indemnities.
Oh, absolutely. They fight hard to limit their liability. That leads to limitations on sellers' liability. It'll negotiate for financial caps, a ceiling on their total payout, maybe 20–30% of the purchase price for general warranties.
Okay, a maximum exposure.
And time limits. How long after closing can the buyer bring a claim? Typically 18 to 24 months for general business stuff, but much longer for fundamental things like title to shares or tax issues, often tied to the statute of limitations.
Makes sense.
They also push for thresholds to avoid nuisance claims. A de minimis minimum value for any single claim, and a basket, an aggregate amount all claims must reach before the seller actually has to pay anything.
So lots of mini claims might not trigger liability.
Correct. And finally, there's the disclosure letter. This is a separate document where the seller lists exceptions, things they know about. If something is fairly disclosed in this letter, the buyer generally can't claim breach of warranty for it later.
Ah, so it carves out known issues.
Exactly. It's a real negotiation interplay. A seller might refuse a broad warranty, but offer a specific indemnity for a disclosed risk instead. It's all about balancing risk.
That's a really intricate web for managing risk in a sale. Fascinating. Now let's switch gears to the shareholders agreement, the rulebook for relationships. How does that look?
Right, the SHA. It governs the company's internal life among the owners. It's all about the ongoing relationships. So you have crucial clauses on power and control, basically, governance.
Okay, who decides what?
Yeah, things like board composition. Specific shareholders might get a contractual right to nominate directors, ensuring they have representation in management. Remember, the formal appointment is still by the general meeting under company law, but the SHA locks in the nomination right.
And minority protection.
That's where reserve matters come in. This is huge for minority shareholders. It's a list of critical decisions, issuing new shares, taking on big debt, changing the business direction, selling major assets that need a supermajority vote, or maybe even the specific consent of that minority shareholder.
So veto rights, essentially.
Effectively, yes, which leads naturally to the need for deadlock resolution clauses. If you have shareholders with veto rights who disagree, how do you break the impasse?
Good question.
Mechanisms range from structured negotiation, mediation, all the way to things like shotgun or buy or sell clauses. Those force a resolution by making one party, offer to either buy out the other or sell their own shares at a set price. If you grant strong veto rights, you absolutely need robust deadlock provisions.
Makes sense. What about shares changing hands later on?
That's covered by clauses on share transfers. These are the traffic rules for ownership, who can become a shareholder and how.
Controlling who your partners are.
Exactly. You might see lockup periods, stopping sales for a while to ensure stability. Preemption rights, or rights of first refusal, are common. They require a seller to offer shares to existing shareholders first.
Before going outside.
Right. And approval clauses requiring consent, maybe from the board or other shareholders, before transferring to an outsider. For the Luxembourg's SARL, that's the Société à Responsabilité Limitée, the company law actually has a default approval process in Articles 7, 10, 12, but an SHA can tailor that, make it stricter or different.
Okay.
Then you have the pair, tag-along and drag-along rights. Tag-along protects minorities. If a majority shareholder sells, the minority can tag along and sell their shares on the same terms.
So they don't get left behind.
Exactly. And drag-along protects the majority. If they find a buyer for 100% of the company, they can drag the minority shareholders into the sale, forcing them to sell too. It ensures a clean exit for everyone.
A negotiated balance there.
Always. It balances the majority's need for an exit with fair treatment for the minority.
What about the money side of things?
Yep. Clauses on finance and economics. You might see a dividend policy outlining expectations for distributing profits. Anti-dilution provisions are key for investors. They protect their ownership percentage if the company issues new shares later at a lower price. Think contractual preemption rights, or maybe ratchet clauses that adjust their holding. And sometimes funding obligations, committing shareholders to inject more capital if needed.
Wow. Quite comprehensive.
It has to be. And the key thing to remember is these agreements aren't just templates you fill in. They're dynamic. Each clause interacts with the others. A good lawyer looks at it holistically, making sure the whole thing works together as a coherent, resilient framework for the relationship or the transaction. Treating them as just a collection of standard clauses is a critical error.
That's a great point about the holistic approach. Now, it's fascinating how these different purposes must shape the actual negotiation process, not to mention the costs and the time involved. How does that play out?
You're right. The negotiation dance is quite different. It often kicks off with non-binding documents, a letter of intent, LOI, or a term sheet. These outline the basic deal and set the tone. Interestingly, they often include legally binding clauses, usually on confidentiality and exclusivity.
Exclusivity, meaning the seller can't shop the deal around.
Exactly, usually for a set period while the buyer does their homework. And there's a legal principle here in Luxembourg from the Civil Code Article 1382 implies a duty to negotiate in good faith. If talks are really advanced and one side just walks away abruptly without a good reason, they could actually be liable for the other party's wasted costs.
Interesting. So you can't just bail out without cause if you're deep in talks.
Not without potential consequences, no. Now, the dynamics differ hugely. SPA negotiation, often that bilateral tug-of-war we mentioned. Buyer wants broad protection. Seller wants narrow scope, lots of qualifications, strict limits on time and money for liability.
Head to head.
Pretty much. SHA negotiation, though, is often multi-party. You might have a majority founder, a venture capital investor, maybe an angel investor. Everyone has different priorities. The majority wants control and flexibility. Minority investors focus on protection, information rights, ensuring they have a way out and exit strategy.
More complex dynamics.
Definitely can be.
And what about the cost? The price of getting this precision right?
Good question. Legal costs and pricing in Luxembourg aren't set by some official tariff. It really depends on the deal's complexity, the time involved, how important the transaction is, and frankly, the lawyer's experience and reputation.
So how are fees usually structured?
Hourly rates are very common for M&A work. Sometimes you might get capped fees, which helps with budgeting, or even a success fee component, though full contingency fees are not typical here.
Can you give us a ballpark?
Well, it varies hugely, but a standard SHA for a small or medium-sized company could range from, say, several thousand euros up to maybe over 20,000 euros in legal fees alone. For the total transaction cost of an M&A deal for an SME, including due diligence and everything, you might be looking at anywhere from 10,000 to 50,000 euros perhaps. And for bigger, more complex deals, easily over 100,000 euros.
Okay, significant costs involved.
And don't forget ancillary costs, notary fees if needed, maybe registration duties. Though for a simple share sale agreement with a suspensive clause, the registration duty might just be a fixed fee of 12 euros.
Good to know. Understanding those costs helps prepare, but what about the time? How long does this all take, from the first handshake to the final closing?
Again, complexity is king. A typical private M&A deal here in Luxembourg could take anywhere from a few months to, well, over a year.
It's a wide range.
It is. The typical life cycle looks something like this. First, the preparatory stage, initial talks, LOI, maybe a non-disclosure agreement. Then due diligence, the buyer investigates the target company, legally, financially, operationally.
Kicking the tires.
Exactly. Then comes the core legal work, STA drafting and negotiation. After that, signing. But it's often not over yet. There's usually an interim period between signing and closing for those conditions precedent to be met. And finally, closing the formal handover of shares against payment.
And for an SHA.
The SHA timeline is usually driven by whatever event prompts it forming the company, a new funding round. Negotiation could be quick if everyone's aligned, or can drag on if there are fundamental disagreements about control or exit rights.
Does good preparation speed things up?
Massively. If a seller does their own vendor due diligence up front, it can really shorten the buyer's investigation time. Using simpler price mechanisms like a fixed price instead of complex earnouts also cuts down negotiation time and legal costs. Thorough preparation is absolutely an investment in efficiency. It helps prevent disputes and painful renegotiations later.
That's a really practical overview. Now, zooming back out a bit, how do these agreements fit into the specific Luxembourg legal framework, especially considering it's always evolving?
That's a critical aspect. So formalities first. For a share transfer to actually be effective against the company and third parties, it generally needs to be formally notified to the company or accepted by it. In practice, this often means the company is made a party to the SPA, or there's a formal notification followed by inscription in the Shareholder Register. Article 1690 of the Civil Code underpins this.
Okay, formal steps are needed.
But here's where the SHA really stands out. As a private contract, it needs no specific formalities beyond the parties signing it. Crucially, it is not filed anywhere and remains entirely confidential.
That's the unique selling point you mentioned earlier.
Absolutely. Compare that to the company's Articles of Association. The articles and any changes to them must be filed with the Luxembourg Business Registers, and the LBR, and published electronically in the RESA, the Recueil électronique des sociétés et associations.
So why does that confidentiality matter so much?
It allows shareholders to agree on commercially sensitive things privately. Think about specific dividend rights for different share classes, complex formulas for valuing shares if someone exits, or bespoke governance rules that go beyond the articles. You can put all that in the SHA without broadcasting it to the public or competitors. It offers huge flexibility.
That makes perfect sense. And you mentioned the law is evolving.
Yes, Luxembourg's corporate law isn't static. The Law of 7, August 2023, brought some important clarifications showing the system is responsive.
Any practical examples?
Sure. One big one concerns Saral share transfers, Article 7, 10, 12. The amendment clarified that when transferring shares to a non-shareholder, the approval comes from the shareholders only. It removed some old ambiguity about whether management had a say.
Streamlined it.
Exactly. And it also confirmed that if approval is refused, the company can repurchase the shares without needing the consent of the shareholder who wanted to sell. That simplified things quite a bit, strengthening the position of the existing majority shareholders.
Okay, clearer rules there. Anything else?
Another useful clarification involved voting rights in an SA, a Société Anonyme. Article 450-1 now explicitly states that suspended voting rights, maybe because shares aren't fully paid up or rights that have been formally waived, they don't count towards quorum or majority thresholds at general meetings.
Seems like technical housekeeping.
It is, but it's crucial housekeeping. It provides certainty for shareholder meetings and reduces the risk of decisions being challenged on procedural grounds. Overall, these kinds of amendments boost legal certainty. That makes Luxembourg more attractive for deals by lowering risk and potential costs. This commitment to a clear, reliable framework is a real competitive edge.
Looking ahead then, you said the landscape isn't static. What major developments are on the horizon that people involved in M&A here should be tracking?
Well, the big one potentially looming is a national merger control regime. Historically, Luxembourg was, well, unique in the EU for not having one.
Really? The only one?
The only one. But that might change. There's a draft law, Projet de loi 8296, which aims to introduce mandatory prior notification and approval for mergers and acquisitions concentrations, technically that meet certain turnover thresholds and aren't already caught by the European Commission's review.
So a new regulatory hurdle, what's the status?
It's been a bit rocky. The Conseil d'État, the Council of State, actually issued a formal opposition, raising concerns about legal certainty in the draft and demanding it be redrafted. So the exact timing and final form are, frankly, uncertain right now.
But if it does pass, what's the likely impact?
It would be significant. First, a direct hit on transaction timelines. Deals falling into the regime couldn't close until they get clearance from the competition authority. Second, increased costs, as parties would need specialized competition law advice.
And SPAs would need updating.
Absolutely. Conditions precedent and SPAs would routinely have to include getting this national regulatory clearance. It represents a fundamental shift, moving from Luxembourg's traditional ex post approach, intervening only after an issue arises, to ex ante control, meaning prior approval is needed.
Why the change now?
It really reflects the maturation of Luxembourg's economy and aligns it more with international standards seen elsewhere in the EU.
Are there other developments, too? Yes. Beyond merger control, we're also seeing movement on the EU front. The transposition of the EU Mobility Directive, that's EU 21/2121, is set to modernize the rules for cross-border mergers, divisions, and conversions within the EU. What will that mean in practice?
It should lead to more harmonized procedures across the EU, which could be good. It also brings enhanced protections for creditors and minority shareholders. But on the flip side, it likely means added procedural steps, more complexity, and new checks by notaries aimed at preventing abusive arrangements.
So it sounds like the era of uniquely light-touch regulation for M&A in Luxembourg might be ending.
I think that's a fair assessment. While the final shape and timing of the merger control regime are still up in the air, dealmakers really need to start factoring this potential future compliance step into their planning. This evolution will make Luxembourg's M&A process feel more similar to other major EU jurisdictions. It might remove a point of difference, but perhaps it increases its perceived regulatory robustness in the long term.
Okay, a lot to keep an eye on there. So as we wrap up our deep dive, let's just quickly circle back to those three key takeaways. First, purpose is everything. A share purchase agreement is transactional for that one-off sale. A shareholders agreement is relational for managing the ongoing coexistence of owners.
Transactional versus relational. Key difference.
Second, contractual freedom has limits. Yes, Luxembourg law offers flexibility, but you must respect the mandatory rules of the company law and the civil code. No getting around those.
Non-negotiable baseline.
And third, confidentiality is a major plus for the shareholders agreement. Unlike public articles, it stays private, allowing for discrete, tailored arrangements between shareholders.
A very powerful feature.
Absolutely. Understanding these core principles is, well, it's just essential for anyone involved in corporate deals here in the Grand Duchy. And knowing how to structure and negotiate these agreements effectively, that can really be the difference between a smooth process and, a drawn-out dispute. It highlights just how crucial expert advice is at every stage. This podcast uses AI-generated content. All information is for general purposes only and does not constitute financial, investment, legal, or regulatory advice. Listeners should verify information independently and consult qualified professionals for personalized guidance. Hit that like and subscribe button. It was the Luxembourg Fundcast for you today.